It is February 1st, 2012, Anchorage, Alaska. The temperature outside is below freezing, and the last light of the day left hours ago. Samantha Koenig is 18 years old. She is working the closing shift at a small drive-through coffee stand called Common Grounds on Tudor Road. The stand is turquoise. It sits in the parking lot of a health club. She is wearing her favorite lime green t-shirt. She has a boyfriend. She has a father named James Koenig. She has her whole life in front of her, and she has no idea that a man has been watching this particular coffee stand for days, weighing it against other locations, comparing hours of operation, deciding that this one stays open late enough. At approximately 8 o'clock in the evening, a man in a ski mask walks up to the window. He orders a coffee. Then he levels a revolver at Samantha Koenig and tells her it is a robbery. It is not a robbery. He binds her hands, he stuffs napkins into her mouth, he jumps through the window, forces her out of the stand, and walks her across the street to his white pickup truck. Security cameras record every second of it. In the footage, she does not collapse, she does not freeze. People who knew Samantha Koenig said that was exactly who she was. Steady, even then. Even at the end. His name is Israel Keyes. He is 34 years old, he is a licensed contractor, he is the father of a 10-year-old daughter. He attends church, he coaches youth sports, he lives 7 miles from that coffee stand, in a house in the Turnagain neighborhood of Anchor with his girlfriend and his child. And he has been killing people across the United States for over a decade. Here's what you need to understand before we go any further. This is not the story of a killer who snapped one day and couldn't stop. It is not the story of someone that everyone around him somehow missed warning signs about. And it is not a story that ends with justice for every family who deserved it. Israel Keyes built a system. He followed rules. He was, by every measure that law enforcement uses to catch killers, almost impossible to catch. Almost. He had one rule he'd kept for more than 10 years. One line he had never crossed. He was about to break it. And that single decision would bring down everything he had spent his entire adult life constructing. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end when the handcuffs go on. To understand what Israel Keyes did, you have to understand what he built. Most killers leave a pattern, a type of victim, a geography, a signature. Investigators are trained to find those threads, and when they find them, they pull. Ted Bundy had a type. The Gary Ridgway had a geography. Even the most careful predators leave something behind, because killing is emotional, and emotion creates repetition. Keyes decided early on that he would have none of that. He grew up in Colville, the second of 10 children, raised in a remote cabin without electricity or running water, far from neighbors, far from schools, far from anything resembling a normal childhood. His parents were fundamentalist Christians who distrusted the government and kept their children isolated from the outside world. By the time Israel Keyes was a teenager, he had learned one thing above all else: how to exist without being seen. He joined the United States Army in 1998. He was discharged in 2001. And according to Jolene Godin, who led the Keyes investigation out of the Anchorage field office, that is approximately when the killing began. What Keyes built over the next 11 years was not a spree. It was an architecture. He would choose a region of the country not based on where he lived, not based on anyone he knew, and he would fly there paying cash. He would rent a car under his own name because he understood that the absence of a rental record would itself look suspicious. But he paid cash for everything else. No hotels on a credit card, no meals on a debit card, no digital footprint of any kind. He had studied how investigators tracked killers, and he had systematically eliminated every method they used. And then there were the caches. Years before he intended to commit a crime in a given area, Keyes would travel there and bury what he called a kill kit, a bucket, a Home Depot bucket, sealed, buried in a remote location, a reservoir, a stretch of wilderness, a forest easement. Inside, a firearm, zip ties, cash from bank robberies he had committed specifically to fund these operations. Tools for disposing of a body. He would bury the cash, fly home, and wait. Sometimes he waited 2 years, sometimes 3. By the time he returned to retrieve it, there was no recent travel to that area on record. No reason for anyone to look at him. The Federal Bureau of Investigation believes he buried up to 12 of these caches across the United States. They have recovered only a few. Pay attention to this detail, because it tells you everything about how Israel Keyes thought. He was not killing out of impulse. He was not killing out of rage. He told investigators in the FBI interrogation sessions later released through the Bureau's online vault that he enjoyed the planning as much as the act itself. He said, "Once I started, there was nothing else like it." Now let me tell you about Bill Currier and Lorraine Currier. In June of 2011, Israel Keyes flew from Anchorage to Chicago. He rented a car. He drove to Blake Falls Reservoir in Adirondack Park, a stretch of wilderness near Parishville, and he dug up a cache he had buried years earlier. A Home Depot bucket, a firearm with a silencer, zip ties, cache. Then he drove to Essex. Essex is a quiet town outside Burlington, the kind of place where people leave their garage doors unlocked. Bill Currier was 49 years old. Lorraine Currier was 55. By all accounts, their neighbors told investigators they were homebodies, content with their animals, their routines, their small life together. They were not targeted because of anything they had done. They were not targeted because of who they were. Keyes had driven through their neighborhood and assessed the house. Ranch-style floor plan. No children's toys in the yard, no dog. He noted the layout of the garage entry. He noted the sightlines from the street. On the night of June 8, 2011, Bill and Lorraine Currier came home from work. They went to bed, and sometime after midnight, Israel Keyes broke through the interior garage door, moved through the dark house wearing a headlamp, and reached their bedroom in what he later described to investigators as a blitz, 5 or 6 seconds from entry to contact. He zip-tied their wrists. He interrogated them about whether there was a firearm in the house. There was, a .38 caliber snub-nose Ruger, which Lorraine had kept for protection. Keyes took it. He forced them into their own car and drove to an abandoned farmhouse he had scouted earlier. He took Bill Currier into the basement and tied him to a stool. He left Lorraine in the car and went back inside. When he returned, she was gone. She had gotten the door open and was running toward the street. He tackled her and dragged her back. In the basement, Bill Currier had worked himself partially free of his restraints. He was yelling, over and over, "Where is my wife? Where is my wife?" Tristram Coffin, who later reviewed the case files and spoke publicly about the Currier case, said they were friendly, peaceful, good people who had encountered a force of pure evil acting at random. Their bodies have never been found. The abandoned farmhouse was demolished before the FBI could search it. An 11-week search of the landfill where the debris was taken turned up nothing. Bill and Lorraine Currier vanished from their home in Vermont, and no piece of them was ever recovered. And no one in Vermont at that point had any reason to look at a contractor in Anchorage, Alaska. So let's take a breath here, because what you've just heard is only part of what investigators eventually pieced together. A man with no fixed geography, no victim type, no signature, operating since at least 2001 across multiple states, with weapons he buried years in advance, a couple in Vermont missing with no leads, no suspects, no bodies, a decade of crimes with nothing to pull on. If this is the kind of story that keeps you up at night, and it should, hit subscribe and drop a comment below. Before today, had you ever heard the name Israel Keyes? Because here's what comes next. The mistake. Israel Keyes had rules, not guidelines, rules. And he followed them with the same discipline he applied to everything else. Rule 1, never kill close to home. The geographic distance between where you live and where you operate is your primary protection. A detective in Vermont has no reason to pull flight records for a contractor in Alaska. Rule 2, never create a financial trail connected to a victim. No ransom, no stolen cards, no transactions that place you in a location at a specific time. Rule 3, never give investigators a thread to pull. No communication, no contact with the victim's family or friends, no loose ends of any kind. For over a decade, he kept every one of them. Then he met Samantha Koenig. Keyes later told investigators that he broke his first rule almost casually, that he had simply gotten the urge to act and chosen a target that was convenient. Samantha worked 7 miles from his house. She was 18 years old, closing a drive-through coffee stand alone at night. He had staked out the location in advance, comparing it to other stands in the area. He chose common grounds on Tudor Road because it stayed open later than the others. He was not supposed to do this. He knew that, and he did it anyway. After he abducted Samantha Koenig on the night of February 1st, 2012, he brought her to a shed behind his own house. He left her there. And here's the part that is almost impossible to process. He packed a bag, walked back inside, kissed his daughter goodnight, and left for a pre-planned Caribbean cruise with his family the following morning. He was gone for 2 weeks. When he returned to Anchorage on February 17th, he went to the shed. And then he did something that violated every rule he had ever set for himself. He decided to collect a ransom. He posed Samantha for a photograph, a Polaroid, to serve as proof of life. He held a copy of the Anchorage Daily News dated February 13th in the frame so her family would believe she was still alive. He had sewn her eyelids open with fishing line. He typed a ransom demand for $30,000 on the back of a photocopy of that photograph, using a manual typewriter he had purchased specifically for this, and he left the note at Connor's Bog Dog Park in Anchorage, tucked beneath a memorial flyer for a dog named Albert. He texted Samantha's boyfriend from her stolen phone. The note was under Albert, and then he gave her family a debit card. Samantha's debit card, linked to her bank account. The plan was that once the $30,000 was deposited, Keyes would drain it and disappear. The family complied. The money went in. What Keyes did not fully account for was what happens when law enforcement monitors a debit card in real time. FBI Special Agent Jolene Godin and the Anchorage Task Force were watching every transaction. On March 1st, 2012, the card was used at an ATM in Anchorage. Then Keyes flew to Las Vegas. The card hit in Arizona, then New Mexico, then Texas, twice. The FBI tracked each withdrawal, watching the route take shape in real time, relaying coordinates ahead of the withdrawals to local law enforcement. On March 13, 2012, a Texas state trooper pulled over a blue Kia Soul near Lufkin. The driver was Israel Keyes. He had driven that rental car 2,847 miles since leaving Anchorage. He had the debit card. He had Samantha Koenig's cell phone. There was no explaining any of it. He was 34 years old. He had been operating for 11 years. He had never made a mistake. And then he made every mistake at once. In custody, Israel Keyes did something almost no killer does. He talked. Not because he felt remorse. The FBI interrogation transcripts released publicly through the Bureau's online evidence vault make that clear. Keyes spoke about his crimes with the flat precision of someone describing a construction project. He offered details. He corrected investigators when they got facts wrong. He took visible satisfaction in the fact that he had operated for so long without being caught. And he seemed to understand that the only leverage he had left was the information he was still withholding. He confirmed Samantha Koenig. He confirmed Bill and Lorraine Currier, and he gave FBI agents details about the Currier murders that had never been made public, the caliber of the gun he had taken from their nightstand, the specific way he had entered the garage, the name of the abandoned road near the farmhouse. Details that proved beyond any doubt that he had been there. He told investigators about Washington. He believed he had killed 4 people there. He told Ted Holla and Colleen Sanders, who spent years working the Keyes case out of the FBI's Poulsbo field office, that at least one body had been sunk in Lake Crescent near Port Angeles. Dive teams searched the lake. The water is deep and cold and extraordinarily clear, and it has swallowed things before. He told investigators about a victim buried somewhere in upstate New York in April of 2009. He told them about a couple killed in Washington state sometime between 2001 and 2005. He gave timelines, he gave regions, he withheld names, he was negotiating, feeding information slowly, trying to leverage what he knew into a deal that would keep him alive long enough to maintain control of the one thing he had always controlled, the story. But it gets darker. The FBI, working urgently now to get as much as possible before the March trial date, realized that the abandoned farmhouse where Bill and Lorraine Currier had been killed had been demolished. The building was gone. The FBI launched an 11-week search of the landfill where the debris had been taken. State police, Essex police, FBI agents sifting through the remnants of a demolished structure looking for any trace of two people. They found nothing. Bill and Lorraine Currier had been placed in garbage bags and covered in Drano and construction debris by a man who had spent a decade thinking about exactly this problem. Their bodies have never been found. On December 2nd, 2012, Israel Keyes was found dead in his cell at the Anchorage Correctional Complex. He had cut his wrists and used his own blood to write a poem. Beneath his mattress, investigators found a piece of paper with 11 skulls drawn on it. 11. The FBI had confirmed 3 victims by that point. That left 8 people, 8 lives, represented only by crude drawings in a dead man's blood in a jail cell in Alaska. FBI case agent Jolene Godin said afterward that it was really important to bring some type of closure to family members still wondering what happened to their loved ones. As of today, 8 of those 11 victims remain unidentified. The kill caches that haven't been found are still out there. Somewhere in American wilderness, buried in a bucket, there may be evidence of murders that have never been connected to anyone. Cases filed as accidents. Cases filed as disappearances. Cases that were never filed at all because the victims were the kind of people the system doesn't look hard for. Here's what we know for certain, and what we don't. We know Israel Keyes killed at least 11 people. We know he operated across multiple states. We know his victims were male and female, ranging from teenagers to the elderly. We know he chose most of them at random after studying their homes, their routines, the floor plans of the houses they felt safe in. And we know he broke one rule. One. After 11 years. He killed 7 miles from his house. He created a ransom trail. He handed investigators a debit card and drove east, making withdrawal after withdrawal, as if some part of him, the part that had kept every rule for over a decade, had finally quietly decided it was done. So here's what this story leaves you with. First, a killer without a pattern is the most dangerous kind of killer that exists. Every investigative system we have is built on finding repetition, a geography, a victim type, a signature. Israel Keyes gave investigators none of that deliberately for over a decade. The FBI's own profilers described him as unlike anything they had encountered in modern American criminal history. Second, the thing that caught him was not brilliant detective work. It was one debit card, one lapse. After 11 years of perfect operational discipline, he handed a grieving family a way to track him and then drove across 4 states using it. The system didn't find Israel Keyes. Israel Keyes found himself. And third, this is the one that stays with you. 8 of his victims have no names. Somewhere in this country, there are families who reported a loved one missing and never got an answer. A disappearance ruled accidental. A cold case in a filing cabinet. People who vanished in parks, in campgrounds near bodies of water on quiet roads, and whose absence was written off because no one connected it to anything larger. Those 8 people had names, they had families, they had someone who noticed they were gone. Israel Keyes took that from them, and then he took the answers with him. If you've ever looked at a missing persons case and felt like something didn't add up, if you live near a lake in Washington State, or the Adirondacks in upstate New York, or anywhere along the routes on the FBI's published timeline of his movements between 1997 and 2012, that information is still live. The FBI's case file on Israel Keyes remains open. The interactive map of his known travel is available at FBI.gov. Someone out there knows something. They may not know that they know it. Drop a comment below. Had you ever heard of Israel Keyes before today? And if you have a theory about any of his unidentified victims, I want to hear it. The 11 skulls were drawn in his own blood. He drew them himself, which means he counted them. He knew exactly how many there were. We're still trying to find out who they were.